One command in a courtroom sparked a chain reaction no one could control. A judge's accusation, a hidden military past, a viral recording, a false assault charge, and a political cover-up starting to crack in public. The deeper this story goes, the bigger it becomes. If you think this is only about a medal, wait until you see how one moment of arrogance exposed an entire network of lies, privilege, and betrayal.
"Remove it," Judge Harold Kessler demanded, pointing to the woman in the back. His voice sliced through the courtroom silence. Every head turned, the tension became palpable. His gavel struck like a gunshot. "I said take it off, or you will be held in contempt." The woman's expression was a mask of calm. Her steady gaze met his as her words hung in the air. "It is authorized, Your Honor." The judge's blunder was epic. He was chastising a national hero, and his fury was witnessed by a person of immense power. If you find this story compelling, subscribe for the next part. Comment with your location. I'm curious how far this tale will go. Her phone buzzed at 6:14 a.m., but Emma Colton was already awake. 4 a.m. was a combat zone habit her body refused to break. On her mattress in a stark Norfolk apartment, she nursed a black coffee. She answered the call. "Emma, it's me." The man's voice sounded thin and frayed. "They arrested Danny last night. He's at the county lockup." Emma carefully set down her mug. "Which precinct?" "Norfolk PD. They're saying he assaulted a man." "Emma, that's not him." Not without provocation. "I'm aware," Emma said quietly. "I know precisely what happened." The caller was Maria Ruiz, Danny's sister. For 3 years her calls were a constant, sometimes routine, often desperate, always asking for help. Emma never ignored her. "His arraignment is this morning," Maria said, her voice strained. 9 o'clock. "I can't be there, Emma. I'm in Texas with my mother. He has nobody." Emma shut her eyes, feeling the raw panic travel across 1,000 miles. She saw Danny alone at the VA, his hands shaking too much to fill out forms. "I will be there," Emma vowed. "Emma, you don't have to." "Maria, I am going." She ended the call, stood, and pulled her work scrubs from her closet. Her 12-hour shift began at 700 hours, but she called the hospital and took a personal day. The head nurse was floored. Emma hadn't missed a day in 4 years. She offered no reason. None was required. Dressed, she faced her reflection. A 46-year-old with tired eyes and capable hands. No cosmetics, hair pulled back. She retrieved a small velvet box. Inside lay a star-shaped medal on a pale blue ribbon. Feeling its weight, she pinned it over her heart. It had been ages since she wore it. Not since the ceremony. Not since they named her a hero, and she corrected them, saying she was just doing her job. But this was a different fight. This was for him. Her old Honda Civic, with 200,000 miles and a large dent, took her to the Norfolk courthouse. She fed the meter forequarters and went in. The building hummed with anxiety. Lawyers with files rushed past families whose faces were grim masks of fear and rage. A guard waved her past security with barely a look. She was just another person in scrubs, completely invisible. She found Courtroom B taking a seat in the back. The room was mostly empty. Lawyers spoke in hushed tones, a clerk shuffled papers, and 2 bailiffs stood by, bored. On the bench was Judge Harold Kessler. She knew nothing of the man or his history. She didn't know he was called the Hammer. She was unaware of the 3 complaints filed against him, or that he'd once made a 19-year-old witness weep on the stand. She was ignorant of all this, but her lesson was about to start. The first case was a young man charged with petty theft. His attorney had barely started when Kessler cut him off. "Guilty or not, counsellor?" "I'm on a schedule," the lawyer stammered. "Your Honour, we're asking, denied. What is the plea?" "Not guilty," Your Honour. Kessler leaned back, glaring. Trial is March 15th, next. The whole exchange took 30 seconds. This wasn't justice. It was a factory line. Emma watched. She sat silently, observing the grim spectacle. A DUI was handled in less than a minute. A domestic violence hearing was even quicker. The system was brutal. He would interrupt, dismiss, and bully, mistaking his authority for absolute power. Then the clerk announced Danny's case. Number 7421, State versus Daniel Ruiz, aggravated assault. Emma sat upright. A bailiff led Danny in from a side door. The orange jumpsuit consumed him. He was cuffed. A bruise darkened his cheek. A cut was over his eye. He looked broken, but Emma saw the soldier within. She knew that posture, shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. She knew those eyes, scanning the room as they had once scanned the deserts of Helmand Province. Sergeant First Class Daniel Ruiz, Marine Corps, retired. 2 deployments to Afghanistan. 1 Purple Heart. A traumatic brain injury. An honourable discharge. And now 1 pair of steel restraints. He did not see Emma. His gaze was fixed forward, a relic of his service. He stood by a public defender who looked barely out of school, her hands shaking. Judge Kessler glanced at Danny and saw only a case file in an orange jumpsuit. Mr. Ruiz, charged with aggravated assault. How do you plead? The lawyer stood. Not guilty, Your Honour, and we request a bail reduction. Mr. Ruiz is a Marine veteran with a clean record. He's not a flight risk. A veteran, Kessler said, his voice laced with contempt. So are half the criminals in my courtroom. It's no excuse for violence. The lawyer flushed. Your Honour, that is not what I meant. Bail is $50,000. Next case. Sir, please. Mr. Ruiz cannot make, I said. Next case. Danny was stoic. He didn't argue. He just lowered his head, a man used to being unheard. It was then Kessler's eyes fell on Emma. He didn't see her scrubs. He saw the medal. The small golden star on its light ribbon caught his eye, and he fixated on it. He stopped. His eyes narrowed. Leaning forward, he pointed at Emma. You, in the back, on your feet. Everyone turned. Emma stood with quiet grace. What is that on your scrubs? Kessler demanded. It is a medal, Your Honour, Emma replied, her voice steady. I can see that. What is it? The Medal of Honour, Your Honour. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. People traded glances. The clerk looked up. A bailiff stood taller. Kessler's face hardened with rage, his sentence already decided. The Medal of Honour, he mocked, his voice thick with scepticism. A nurse was given that medal? I expect nothing, Your Honour. I was simply answering your question. Take it off. The command was a weapon, slicing the tension. The court fell deathly silent. Emma did not move. Your Honour, this is an authorized award. It is my legal right to wear it. Kessler's gavel came down hard, cracking the wood. I gave you an order. I will not have stolen valour in this court. It is a disgrace. The accusation hung in the air, aimed at a woman, a nurse, not the conventional image of a war hero. Emma's jaw set, her voice unwavering. With all respect, sir, this was awarded for actions in a combat theatre. I am authorized. You earned no such thing, Kessler spat. You are a fraud creating a disturbance. Bailiff, if that medal isn't off in 30 seconds, arrest her. The nearest bailiff stiffened, visibly conflicted. He looked at the judge, at Emma, and then his eyes fixed on the medal. A spark of recognition flashed in his eyes, the look of one who had served. He did not move a muscle. Bailiff, Kessler thundered, are you deaf? The officer responded carefully. Your Honour, I believe that is a genuine. I don't care what you believe. I gave an order. He took one step toward Emma. Her unblinking gaze stopped him. There was no defiance in it, just a profound stillness forged in fires he could never comprehend. He stopped. The courtroom doors opened with a slow, deliberate sound. All attention snapped to the entrance. A man in a full navy dress uniform entered, his chest a wall of ribbons. 4 stars gleamed on his shoulders. He stood with perfect bearing, his face a mask of iron will. The sharp sound of his shoes on the marble floor was the cadence of command. He walked down the aisle, his gaze locked forward, moving like a man who had faced true hell and won. He stopped, looked at Emma, and uttered a single name. Iron Widow. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, then gave a small nod. Admiral? The man then turned to face the bench. I am Rear Admiral Thomas Callahan, U.S. Navy Special Warfare Command, he announced, stunning Kessler into silence. The woman whose medal you dishonoured, the Admiral stated, is retired Chief Petty Officer Emma Colton. He explained she served with SEAL Team 4 and earned the Medal of Honor for Valor, moving 3 wounded Marines, including Daniel Ruiz, across a 400-yard kill zone. Under constant fire, she eliminated 2 enemies with her pistol while shielding a downed Marine with her own body. Though shot 3 times herself, she rendered aid until every man was evacuated. The Admiral advanced, his voice a low command. That medal wasn't stolen. It was paid for with her blood and the blood of men she saved, one of whom you have in chains. He motioned toward Danny Ruiz. Danny's head snapped up, his eyes locking on Emma's. In that instant, every defence he had built his apathy, his silence crumbled. Her name formed on his lips, a broken whisper. Iron Widow. Emma met his stare, not with tears, but with the same firm nod from a decade ago, when she swore he would live. Told you I'd find you, Danny. The file slipped from the defender's hands, its pages scattering. The lawyer was paralyzed, her gaze shifting between the 3, unable to comprehend the scene. Kessler's knuckles were white on the bench, his face ashen. The gavel before him was now just a piece of wood. Before he could speak, the Admiral cut in. I hadn't planned to be here. A former teammate called 30 minutes ago about a judge shaming Chief Colton with lies. Callahan fixed Kessler with a glare of cold iron. I've testified before Congress and briefed 4 presidents. I've stood over the caskets of men who gave everything. I have never witnessed a more vile display of disrespect than I saw from you. In the gallery, a woman began to weep. I drove from the Pentagon, Callahan said, because some duties are absolute. Defending her honor is one. He faced Emma. Chief, you will not remove that medal. Not for anyone. A spark of defiance lifted Emma's chin. I know, sir. A rare smile touched the Admiral's lips. That's the Iron Widow, I recall. He turned back to the judge. I suggest you reconsider your actions today, Your Honor. In this case and others. I assure you, no one here will forget this, and neither will I. He stepped back, his authority emanating from service, not a title. His power came from knowing the woman at the back of the room had earned every honor she wore. Kessler sat on his bench, utterly silenced for the first time in his career. The courtroom was frozen. At his table, Danny Ruiz sobbed, tears cutting trails on his face as he looked at the woman who had saved him from 2 different kinds of hell. The time was 9:27. No one stirred. The quiet was broken only by the buzz of the lights and Danny's harsh breaths. Judge Kessler seemed as if he'd been struck, his mouth working with no sound. He looked from the Admiral to Emma, then to the bailiff who had defied his order. For the first time in 15 years, Harold Kessler was speechless. The public defender, Sarah Chen, was the first to move. She knelt, her trembling hands rustling the scattered documents as she gathered them. Standing with the file, she looked at Danny with new eyes. She'd received his case 45 minutes ago, knowing nothing but his name. Now she was defending a man carried from a firefight by a hero. She felt adrift. Danny's bruised, tear-streaked face stayed fixed on Emma. He blinked, as if to prove she was real. "Emma," he mouthed. She gave a small nod. "Sit down, Danny. It's not over." He did so without question. It wasn't a command, but a truth. When Emma Colton spoke, you listened. The last time she gave him an order, her voice was the only thing keeping him alive. Admiral Callahan stood his ground, his gaze locked on the judge. The ribbons on his uniform were a history of service, proving his right to stand wherever he pleased. Kessler finally spoke, his voice a pale imitation of its usual force. "Admiral, I respect your career, but this is my courtroom. Your Honor," Callahan's voice sliced through the air, "I am not here to command you. I am here because a good man was dishonored. My point has been made. What you do now is your decision." Kessler's jaw worked. His hand moved toward the gavel, then recoiled. He surveyed the gallery, meeting dozens of watching eyes. An old man in a Marine Corps cap shook his head, his face a mask of cold fury. "Your Honor," Sarah Chen's voice was clear and strong, "given this, I move to reconsider bail for my client, retired Sergeant Daniel Ruiz. He has a Purple Heart for a TBI, from the very attack that nearly killed him. For a decade he has fought post-traumatic stress, failed by the very system meant to help. This incident was a trauma response." She no longer needed the file. Sergeant Ruiz reacted instinctively when a man grabbed him from behind in a bar, and instead of help for his crisis, he was jailed for 12 hours without a phone call. A crack appeared in Kessler's composure. "The woman here today," Sarah continued, "came because my client's sister called from 1,000 miles away, where she sits with their dying mother. Chief Colton was the only person who answered his call for help. She appeared here wearing that medal, not for vanity, but to prove the man you see in chains is a casualty of war. He has been failed by the system and by you." The accusation landed with the force of a physical blow. The 5'3" lawyer stood her ground. Callahan gave a small, approving nod. Danny stared down at the table. He gripped its edge, his knuckles bone-white, fighting to control a decade of buried trauma. Kessler's gaze landed on Danny, truly seeing him for the first time. "Sergeant Ruiz," Kessler said, his voice softer now. Danny looked up. "Is the Admiral's account correct? You were in Helmand Province?" Danny's throat felt tight. "Yes, sir." "And Chief Petty Officer Colton saved your life?" Danny glanced toward Emma, who stood like a statue, the medal a beacon on her chest. She offered no signal, only her steady gaze. "She did more than save my life, sir." Danny's voice broke. She gave it back. A woman in the gallery gasped. The man in the Marine hat lowered his head. "I was 22, Danny whispered. He spoke without being asked, the words spilling from him. "At 22, I thought I was invincible. We all did. Then the ambush came, and my world vanished. A round hit my leg, another my shoulder. I was down, dying in the dirt. The room was utterly still. And then she was there. One moment I was fading, the next she was dragging me. Not comforting me, but ordering me. She yelled, 'You will not die, Marine! Not on my watch!' And I obeyed. He scrubbed his face with his cuffed hands. She dragged me 400 meters. She was hit too, bleeding, but never stopped. When the evac chopper arrived, she made them take me first. She made sure every single one of us was aboard. A corpsman told me later she nearly bled out on that field, refusing aid until we were all safe." He locked his eyes on Kessler. "The woman you insulted, the one you ordered to remove her medal, she is the only reason I am alive, the only reason I ever saw my family again. Every single day I've had since then is a gift from her." A heavy silence descended. Kessler took off his glasses and pressed his fingers to his eyes. As his hands dropped, his expression transformed. The judge's fury had evaporated, leaving raw humanity. "Chief Petty Officer Colton," Kessler said, his voice low. Emma met his gaze. "Your Honour, I must offer my apology," the words hung there. From a man like him, this was a profound surrender. His career was built on certainty. Now he uttered what the room demanded. "My words to you were indefensible. My judgment was clouded. My ego obstructed my duty, and in doing so I failed you and our country." Emma gave a short, firm nod. "Accepted, Your Honour." Just the one word. No victory, no rage. She took his apology with the same iron will she had his insult, steadying the courtroom. Kessler then faced the defence. "Miss Chen?" "Yes, sir?" "I'm releasing Sergeant Ruiz on his own recognizance." Let him go. Relief washed over Sarah so powerfully her legs shook. "Thank you, sir. I am also ordering a full review of this arrest and an immediate VA evaluation for Sergeant Ruiz. The prosecution must justify jail time over treatment if they proceed." He paused. "The contempt charge is also dismissed." His eyes settled on Emma. "Chief Petty Officer Colton. That medal will always have a place in my court." Emma said nothing, simply returning to her chair as a bailiff approached. The bailiff leaned close, his words for her ears only. Their eyes met, and a silent understanding fractured her stoic facade. The officer returned to his post. If questioned, he'd only state, "That was between the chief and me." Danny's release took an hour. The cuffs came off at 10:45. He stood rubbing his wrists, blinking. Sarah Chen packed her briefcase, her focus shifted. She had entered with a hopeless case and left with a renewed cause. Admiral Callahan stood waiting in the hall. As Danny came out, the Admiral took his hand in a solid grip. "How are you holding up, son?" Callahan inquired. Danny's jaw was set. "Some days are a war, sir." "I know. It never stops. But you get better at the fight. It shrinks." Danny just nodded, unable to speak. The Admiral offered a card. "This is a direct line to the Seal Family Foundation. Call them tomorrow. They'll be waiting for you tomorrow morning." Danny took the card as if it were a lifeline. "And Danny," Callahan's voice softened, "she travelled across the city for you. Make it worthwhile. Copy?" "Yes, sir." With a squeeze to his shoulder, the Admiral left. His footsteps echoed like a finished job. Emma, the last one out, saw Danny alone, clutching the card and his personal effects. He watched her approach, 10 feet of silence between them as the hallway slowly cleared. The sounds of the courthouse rushed back in. "You didn't have to come," Danny said flatly. "I did." "How did you find out?" Maria called. He squeezed his eyes shut. "She shouldn't have. You have done too much already, Emma." She stepped forward. "Danny, look at me." His eyes met hers. "Remember the medevac? The second one. You told me to leave you." His chin started to tremble. "You said we never leave our own behind." "That's right. I meant it then, and I mean it now. This isn't a combat zone. You're not bleeding out. But you're wounded. You need backup. I am not leaving." Danny's lips pressed into a thin line as he faced the wall. Looking at her would break him. "I'm a disaster, Emma," he whispered. "A complete disaster. I don't sleep. Can't work. A car backfires and I'm gone. 3 years ago, you talked me into the VA. They put me on a list for 4 months. Then a doctor gave me 11 minutes and a prescription. 11 minutes. That's all my service was worth." "I know," she replied. "The whole system is a mess. I see it every day. But the system failed you. I will not." She drew a folded note from her pocket. She held it out to him. "What's this?" he asked. "A doctor at Portsmouth Naval. James Whitfield, top specialist in combat trauma and TBI. He's expecting you." Danny took the paper, saw the name, and clutched it to his chest. "You already called him," he stated. "At 6:30 this morning before court. He can see you this week." At that, Danny's control shattered. He turned away, a hand clamped over his mouth. His shoulders began to shake. He'd survived war zones and explosions, only to be broken by a phone call in a hallway. Emma stood her ground, solid and patient, giving him the space he needed. When he faced her again, his eyes were red, his breathing measured. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Show up. Show up for yourself the way you did for us." He nodded. He put the paper in his pocket with the Admiral's card. They walked out of the courthouse together. The morning was bright, the lot packed. Emma pictured her understaffed unit across town, the chaos, but seeing Danny Ruiz walking free beside her, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. They reached her Honda Civic. A small smile touched his lips. "You still have this thing?" "It works. It barely worked a decade ago. It got me here." He rested a hand on the roof, hesitating. "Emma," what that judge said. "How do you just brush that off?" She met his eyes over the car. "His opinion of me is his business. I know my worth. The people who matter know it too. Nothing else matters." She hit the unlock button. "Get in. I'm buying you breakfast. Then we're making a plan." He stood for a moment, the sun and the day's events weighing on him. Then he got in. The engine sputtered, caught, and settled into its old rhythm. She pulled out, aiming for a waterfront diner with strong coffee. Danny watched the city slide by. Neither of them said a word. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of all they had survived and all they still fought for. The Medal of Honor on her dash caught the light as she turned. They took a booth at the back of the diner. Old habits die hard. Danny stared at his hands on the table as if they belonged to a stranger. A server came near. Emma ordered 2 coffees and eggs for both of them. He didn't argue. He'd only had chips the day before. He cupped the warm mug, anchoring himself to the moment. "Tell me what happened," Emma said, her tone professional, a sign he could trust her. Danny stared into his cup. "I was at a bar, Kelly's, on Granby. I go there sometimes. It's usually calm." He took a deep breath. "I was at the bar. 2 beers. I wasn't there for a fight, Emma. I swear. I know. Keep going. Some college kids were loud by the pool table. I was tuning them out. Just wanted quiet." His knuckles whitened on the mug. One of them came up from behind. He put his hand on my shoulder, and I just... He trailed off, his jaw clenched. "Danny, the next part is blank." His voice was a raw whisper. "I know it's an excuse, but 1 second his hand was on me, the next the cops had me down and he was bleeding. I was gone. Back in Helmand. My body just... It did what it was trained to do." Emma nodded, her gaze unshakable. She had heard variations of this story from too many men. Different place. Same broken wiring in his mind. A brain that interpreted a simple touch as a hostile act. A nervous system still fighting a long-finished war. "How bad was he?" she asked. "Broken nose," the report says. "I have no memory of the punch." "Did they see him touch me first?" Danny's laugh was hollow. "No one." "The bartender said I snapped, unprovoked." That one word was the foundation of the case. "Were there cameras?" Danny looked up. No one said. Emma was already on her phone. "Describe the bartender. Some guy, mid-30s. Tattoos on his arm? I'll find him." She was already working the problem. "Your lawyer is Sarah Chen. She's new but smart. She'll get that tape. Emma, I'm broke. She's a public defender. It costs you nothing. Just focus on getting better. One problem at a time." Their food arrived. Emma started eating. Danny only looked at his plate. He twisted his mug, a nervous habit like turning his old dog tags. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. "Go ahead." "Why are you doing all this for me?" Emma set down her fork. Her face was a complicated map of emotions. Are you sure you want to know? Yeah. It's been 10 years. You got me out. Mission done. You got the medal. You earned the honors. You could have walked away, and no one would have held it against you. So why this, Emma? This dive, buying me food when you should be on duty? She paused, unfastening the Medal of Honor from her scrubs. She placed it on the scratch tabletop, the blue ribbon a stark line on the wood. See this? I see it, for one single day. The after-action report logged 14 minutes of contact. They held a ceremony for those 14 minutes, gave me this thing, and I hide it because it repulses me. Danny was speechless. What is this about? I'm telling you what the official story omits. The part where I pulled you from that kill box, got you on the helicopter, and came to 3 days later in Germany. A doctor informed me that one of the 3 men I carried out didn't make it. The air in the booth turned cold. The blood drained from Danny's face. Who? Corporal Marcus Webb. He was only 20. I carried him 200 meters with my own leg full of shrapnel. I got him to the landing zone, but he died in surgery 40 minutes later from internal bleeding. Danny's hands went flat against the table. I had no idea. They never told me. That's because I gave the order they shouldn't. I asked command to strike it from the record. I wanted his family to mourn without knowing the person who rescued him had also failed him. Her voice was level, disciplined, but a deep tremor ran beneath it, a pressure contained for a decade. They awarded me this for saving 3 men. But one was lost. Do you understand, Danny? This medal isn't a symbol of heroism to me. It's Marcus Webb's face. I see how he looked when I told him to hold on, that faint smile he tried to manage. I remember his grip weakening just before we got him on the bird. Danny was silent. He could only watch as his entire memory of that day shattered and reformed. So you ask me why I'm here? She continued. I'm here because I failed Marcus. I carry that failure every single day. But you, Danny, you survived. You're alive and breathing. I refuse to watch the country we defended grind you into dust. She reaffixed the medal to her uniform. That's my reason. I'm not some decorated hero. I'm here because the mission continues. Danny buried his face in his hands, and the dam finally broke. This wasn't the quiet grief from the courtroom. It was a raw, 10-year-old sob that tore out from a place he never knew existed until her confession blasted it open. The waitress approached, saw the scene, and quietly retreated. The cook looked over, then went back to his work. The few other customers suddenly found their plates fascinating. They all knew to give them space. It took 4 minutes for Danny to pull himself together. When he finally looked up, his eyes were raw, his face a wreck. He was a man hollowed out, yet some immense internal weight had shifted. It hadn't vanished, but it had moved enough for him to take a true deep breath. I didn't know about Marcus, he rasped, his voice shredded. Emma, I'm so sorry. Don't be. Just be present. That's enough. He nodded, at last picking up his fork. He ate a bite of his cold eggs, chewing as if relearning a basic function. Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Her expression immediately hardened, sharpening into tactical focus. What's going on? Danny asked. Sarah Chen, your attorney. Emma read the message again. She says the district attorney's office just called. They're offering a deal. Misdemeanor assault, 6 months probation, 0 jail time. Danny put his fork down. That's fast. Way too fast. Emma's gaze narrowed. They're trying to bury this before anyone starts asking real questions. Before a motion is filed for the bar's security footage. Before his history comes to light. Danny looked lost. Whose history? Emma showed him the screen. Sarah investigated him. The kid you supposedly attacked, Tyler Brennan, age 23. He has 2 prior assault charges. One was dismissed, the other was pleaded down. His father is also a city councilman. The revelation felt like a physical blow. Danny reread the text, his mind struggling to process it. "His dad is a councilman," he repeated. "Patrick Brennan, District 4, on the Public Safety Committee, which means he holds influence over the police, the DA, everything." Danny leaned back as the conspiracy took shape. That's why the bartender recanted his story. It would appear so. And why the cops never looked for a recording. That's what the facts suggest. And Kessler's bail. $50,000 for a clean record. That wasn't just a tough judge, was it? Emma placed her phone on the table. "I can't be certain, but Sarah will confirm it." Danny's jaw set. The grief from moments ago was hardening into something else. It wasn't rage yet, but its precursor the cold fury of a man who served his country only to have its justice system manipulated for a politician's kid. "They assumed I'd take the plea," Danny said, his voice flat. "They wanted me to plead guilty and just disappear, so no one would know their son was the aggressor, and no one would discover his father helped conceal it." "That seems to be the play," Emma confirmed. "And without the Admiral, without you, I'd be sitting in a jail cell, unable to post a $50,000 bond, waiting for a public defender to sell me out." "Correct." Danny closed his eyes. When he opened them, the broken man from court was gone. He was replaced by someone sharper, more resolved than he'd been in years. "I'm refusing that offer," Danny stated. "Good. I want the recording. I want the truth exposed. And I want his father to answer for this." Emma lifted her mug. "Then that becomes the objective." Her phone buzzed again, not Sarah this time. The number was unknown. She answered. "Chief Colton. You're on speaker. Robert Harmon, Virginia pilot. I received a tip regarding today's events in Judge Kessler's court. My source said a decorated veteran was being railroaded until a Navy admiral intervened. Is this true?" Emma locked eyes with Danny. He held her gaze. This was a new variable. "Who is your source?" Emma countered. "The source is confidential, ma'am, but this report is going public regardless. I would rather include your perspective." Emma took the phone from her ear, weighing the enormous decision. She had always operated from the shadows, letting the Navy protect her identity, turning down every interview and book offer to stay out of the limelight. The mission always came before recognition. But this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Danny, a broken system and a powerful man trying to bury the truth. Sometimes you don't get to choose to stay hidden. "Mr. Harmon," she said, "you'll get a statement, but by my rules, state them. This report is not about me. It's about a Marine veteran who was unjustly detained and whose rights were violated to protect a councilman's son. If that's the story you write, I'll cooperate fully. If you turn this into a puff piece about my medal, we are done here." There was a pause. "Understood." "Can we meet tomorrow? I will be in touch with the arrangements." She ended the call, her gaze returning to Danny. "Are you certain?" "No," Emma admitted, "but I'm certain about you, and that's enough right now." She left a $20 bill on the table as they stepped into the blinding 11:45 a.m. sun. Just 6 hours prior, she'd thought it was an ordinary day. It was anything but. She let Danny out at his rundown apartment complex. He got out, but leaned back in. "Emma?" "Yeah. That call sign, Iron Widow. You know the real story behind it, don't you?" She looked straight ahead through the glass. "Because I was the only survivor." "No, not that," Danny said. "It's because you were terrifying in the best possible way. The rumor was that enemy combatants were ordered to fall back if they saw you. It wasn't about your strength or your voice. You were an elemental force. Fire, injuries, even direct orders. Nothing could stop you from getting to your men." Emma's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Her voice was low and tight. Marcus Webb didn't see me that way. He'd tell you to let that guilt go, and you know it. Their eyes met for a moment. For just a heartbeat, the Iron Widow vanished, leaving only Emma, a woman carrying a weight she could never put down. She had rescued so many, but had lost the one she felt defined her, living a life of penance for a failure that wasn't hers. "Contact Dr. Whitfield in the morning," she commanded. "I will. And the Admiral's charity. They cover rent, legal, all of it. I will. And Danny. Yeah, get a real meal tonight. Not junk from a convenience store." A small smile flickered across his lips. "Yes, ma'am." He stepped away. She drove off, watching him in the mirror as he walked toward his door. His stride was steadier now, his shoulders straighter. 3 blocks on, she parked and killed the ignition. She rested her forehead on the steering wheel, letting the full weight of the day settle. Marcus, Danny's breakdown, the judge's disdain, the Admiral's intervention, the reporter, the councilman's kid, the corrupt system, and her own 4 a.m. ghosts. All of it flooded in. She breathed slowly, counted to 10, sat upright. She shifted into drive and moved on. Emma Cullerton understood combat. She'd been wounded overseas. She'd hauled men twice her size from the kill box. She'd lost someone on a medevac, gotten a medal she despised, and built a fortress around her existence. After a decade of quiet, that fortress was beginning to fail. A blocked number appeared on her screen. She declined it. 2 minutes later, another call. Then a third. By the time she reached the hospital, 7 separate unknown numbers had tried her line. Her phone vibrated a 9th time. A breach. Someone in that room had lit a fuse. Now the world was on the hunt for the Iron Widow. Emma killed the screen, silencing the device. She tossed it aside, exited her vehicle, and walked into the hospital to begin her shift. There were patients waiting, vitals to record, medications to dispense, charts to finalize. A duty she had honored for 4 years, the same one she would face tomorrow, because Emma Cullerton did not break, even as the ground fractured beneath her. The medal was a permanent fixture on her uniform. By 1800 hours, the story had gone feral. Emma remained unaware, her phone lying inert in a locker as she worked. Outside the sanctuary of Norfolk General, the narrative was going nuclear. Sarah Chen was the first to grasp the magnitude. She was at her desk, picking at a cold dinner and rereading Danny's file when her colleague Marcus appeared. "Chen, you were in Kessler's court today, correct?" "I was. What is it?" "Check Twitter." Sarah launched the app. The first thing she saw made her blood run cold. Someone had recorded 17 seconds of audio. It began with Kessler's directive, "Remove that," and ended just after Emma's response, "It is authorized, Your Honor." A ghost account had posted it. By noon, 10,000 shares. 50,000 by 3. By 6, it was a national obsession, complete with a hashtag. Sarah pushed her meal away. She picked up her desk phone and dialed Danny. He answered on the 4th ring. "Hello? Sarah Chen, your counsel. Have you been on the internet?" "No, I keep my distance." "Good, just listen. An audio clip from your hearing leaked. It is now everywhere. My office is being swamped with media inquiries about you and Chief Colton. I've already fielded calls from 3 television networks." Danny was quiet. "How bad is this?" "National news bad. CNN covered it an hour ago. Fox is running a segment tonight. The Virginia Pilot is printing an article. It's that reporter, Robert Harmon, the one who contacted Emma. That is him. His story goes live at 8. Danny, I need to ask, do you wish to release a statement?" "No." "Understood. It's your decision. But this level of visibility is a blade that cuts both ways. It will either be your salvation or your ruin. The public is with you, with Emma. For Kessler, the recording is a disaster. But if Brennan's team gets control of this story, it turns toxic. Danny's voice went cold. Toxic how? They'll label you unstable. They'll position Emma as a calculated stunt. They'll twist the assault to say you're exploiting your service for pity. I have seen them run this play before, Danny. They have infinite resources and no morals. What do you require of me? Simply go dark. Do not engage with reporters. Stay off the internet. Do not answer any number you don't recognize. I will handle this. I am obtaining the surveillance footage from Kelly's pub tomorrow. If it contains what I anticipate, Brennan's whole case disintegrates. What if it has been erased? Sarah paused. It was a tactical question from a man trained to anticipate betrayal. Then we pivot, she replied. We will confront that problem if it arises. She hung up and dialed Emma's number. It went straight to voicemail. A second attempt yielded the same. At 19:30, a bone-weary Emma emerged from Norfolk General. Her feet throbbed. The last 8 hours were a clinical haze. Cleaning wounds, monitoring vitals, comforting an elderly man pre-op, and consoling a wife whose husband had just been moved to intensive care. This was her calling, the reason she chose this life. She pulled out her phone and turned it on. After a 30-second boot, the screen lit up like an explosion. 23 calls, 41 texts, 14 voicemails. The device buzzed furiously for an entire minute. The phone's frantic buzzing tore through the concrete silence of the parking structure. 4 texts from Maria Ruiz. 6 urgent calls from Sarah Chen. A single, stark directive from Admiral Callahan. Call me, now. 3 voicemails from blocked numbers. Buried in the onslaught was a text from a co-worker. Emma, is that you on that recording? It's gone viral. She opened Twitter without logging in. The clip was the first item on the feed. She pressed play, listening to the tinny, digitized sound of her own voice, speaking 5 words of defiance against the judge who questioned her honor. She closed the application, her body slumping against the car's cold metal. She pressed a hand to her face, drawing a measured breath. This was the exact kind of attention she had spent a decade running from, the notoriety she had evaded, the history she had tried to bury beneath a medal, and now it was unleashed, not by her own doing, but because a single phone had immortalized a moment that had become a movement. She called Callahan first. He answered instantly. Emma. Admiral, I have seen it. I suspected you had. Now listen closely. This is going to get much worse before it gets better. Congress is on the line, along with the office of the Secretary of the Navy. We have lost control of the story. The public is incensed with Kessler. They are calling for his removal. I never wanted to be the center of this, sir. You are now. So we get to decide who shapes the narrative. Your silence creates a vacuum that the press and the politicians will scramble to fill. Some of what they say may be accurate. Most will be distorted. Emma remained silent, absorbing the gravity of his statement. There is more, Callahan said. I ran a check on Councilman Patrick Brennan. And? Emma, this goes deeper. His son, Tyler, has a file. 2 previous arrests, and in both cases, the charges simply disappeared. Both times, the police were instructed to stand down, and the district attorney's office misplaced the case files. It is his established method. Danny is simply his most recent target. Emma's hand tightened on the phone. Your intelligence source? An old contact at NCIS, completely unofficial. He has been tracking Brennan for a while, on an unrelated matter, something far bigger. Danny's situation just blew the doors off it. How big? Not on an unsecured line. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Always, sir. Good. 2 objectives. First, you need to connect with Sarah Chen. Second, You are to give Harmon a statement in the morning. Confine your comments to the events in the courtroom, nothing more. Brennan is not to be mentioned. Sarah will handle that front. Understood. And Emma, there is one more thing. Sir, what you did for that young Marine today demonstrated a type of courage I rarely encounter, even in a war zone. Do not ever let yourself forget that. She disconnected the call, watching the steady tide of hospital staff flow past her. Every single one of them was waging a private war, carrying a burden no one else could see. At 20:15, she called Sarah Chen, who answered on the first ring. "Emma, thank God! I have been trying to get a hold of you. I was on shift. You have seen the news?" "I have seen all of it. The Admiral just gave me a situation report. He told me about Brennan, the established pattern." Sarah's voice turned to iron. "Did he inform you about the other victims?" "He said cases were made to vanish. A pattern of obstruction." "It is an absolute cesspool, Emma," Sarah stated grimly. "I have been digging for hours." Tyler Brennan's first charge dates back 2 years. A fight in a bar, he left a man with a shattered jaw. The case was dropped for insufficient evidence, despite having both witnesses and a video. Last year, he assaulted a woman. He was arrested and released in less than 2 hours. Her petition for a restraining order was denied. The charge was downgraded to disorderly conduct. The penalty was a $500 fine. Emma squeezed her eyes shut. "And the woman?" "She moved out of Norfolk a few months later. I tracked her down in Richmond. I talked to her this afternoon." Sarah's voice shook almost imperceptibly. "She just broke down, Emma." She said the authorities made her feel like the perpetrator. Brennan's people tried to pay her off. When she refused, her apartment lease was abruptly terminated. Her job received an official complaint from the city regarding her performance. They ran her out of town. That is the essence of it. Her name is Jessica Torres, and she has agreed to testify for Danny. The complete, brutal truth of it all struck Emma with the force of a physical impact. This was not an isolated injustice. It was a deliberate machine designed to ruin lives. "Sarah, the security footage from the bar. What is our plan to secure it?" "The subpoena is in process, but we've hit a snag. The establishment is owned by a shell corporation. The ownership documents trace back to an attorney whose biggest client is Patrick Brennan." A cold wave of clarity washed over Emma. Brennan is the owner. Through an intermediary, yes. This makes the bartender his employee, not a reliable witness. And that recording confirms Danny's entire account. If they erased it, that is a felony offense. We have them trapped either way. Listen, Emma, this is going to be a street fight. Brennan is wealthy and powerful. He will steamroll us. The instant he detects a threat, he will attack. "Then let him," she replied. There was a beat of silence. "Do you know what you sound like?" "How?" "Like someone who has spent 10 years hoping for a war." She gave no reply. He was correct. Her apartment was dark and still when she arrived home, and she froze as her phone began to vibrate. Danny's name illuminated the screen. "I saw it on the news," he said, his voice strained. "It has gone completely viral." "I know. They are using your Medal of Honor photograph. You look so young." "I was, Danny. They created a legal defense fund. Emma, it has already reached $40,000. She looked at her phone, stunned. 40,000. "In just 6 hours?" he said. "Sarah told me it was at 12,000 an hour ago." "Now it is 40." Emma fell onto her couch. $40,000 from total strangers, for a man they only knew from a 17-second recording. "People are good, Danny," she whispered. "They witness an injustice and feel compelled to act." "What now?" "Let Sarah handle it. It will cover your legal fees. The surplus will go to help other veterans." "Done. Done." After a second, he added. I made a call to Dr. Whitfield. Emma shot upright. You did? I could not delay it any longer. I put in a call, left a message. Good work, Danny. That's solid. And that foundation the Admiral mentioned? I called them. The woman, Linda, Emma, she was so kind. Said they would take care of it all. That, I wasn't alone. His voice broke. It's been so long since anyone said that. It's the truth. Emma's tone was steel. And you're going to hear it more. She heard his breathing, the ragged control of a man on the edge. There's more, Danny confessed. Last night, before he came at me, I was just sitting there, thinking about checking out. The confession sucked all the air from the space between them. Her grip on the phone turned to stone. Danny. Not a plan, just doing the final math, wondering who'd even notice. Danny, you listen to me right now. No, just let me finish. I was in that black hole when he grabbed me. Training just kicked in. In that cell, I figured that was it. But then you showed up. You were just there, Emma, with that medal. You pulled me from the fire. Not just in court. You saved me from myself, just like 10 years ago. How could she answer that? A sob seized her throat. Alone in the dark, tears fell for the first time in years. The man she'd carried from one war was telling her she'd just carried him from another. Danny, she commanded, her voice like iron, you will call Dr. Whitfield tomorrow. That's an order from your chief. Roger that? Roger. And you will always take my call. I don't care if it's 0400. You answer. I will. Now listen up. You'll be all right. You made it through a war. You made it through last night. You're still here. A long pause. Then a faint whisper. Iron Widow. Yeah, that's 3 saves. Don't make me come for a 4th. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I'll believe that when I see it, Marine. She ended the call, the phone slipping from her fingers as the tears dried on her face. At 10:15, a message from Sarah lit her screen. Subpoena approved. Video at 900 tomorrow. If it's gone, I file on Brennan for tampering. Funds at 62,000. Jessica Torres is driving from Richmond to give a statement. Her words, "That family needs to be stopped." Emma set the phone aside, crossed to her bedroom, and opened a drawer. She raised the velvet case. The Medal of Honor shone within. A piece of metal, a judge called a disgrace, an admiral saw as sacred, and a marine held as a lifeline. She closed the lid. Tomorrow she would wear it. Tomorrow she would walk into the storm. But tonight she just sat on her bed in the darkness. She let herself be just Emma. Not the legend, not the chief, just a woman, doing the one thing she was made for, showing up no matter the cost. The clock read 10:32. Across town, Danny Ruiz stared at his ceiling, a doctor's number in one hand, an admiral's in the other. He just kept breathing, vowing tomorrow had to be different. In Richmond, Jessica Torres packed with trembling hands for the 3-hour drive to confront the family that cast her out. In a newsroom, Robert Harmon polished a front-page story for the Virginia Pilot. And in a sprawling Norfolk estate, a raging Patrick Brennan argued with his lawyer, incensed that a 17-second clip had ignited a national firestorm. None of them would sleep, knowing the battle from Courtroom B was only the beginning. Sarah Chen arrived at Kelly's at 8:55 the next morning, subpoena in hand, a deputy at her back. The bar was locked, the door barred. Her first knocks echoed unanswered. She pounded the wood. "Sarah Chen, Public Defender's Office. I have a court order for your security footage. Open up." Silence. The deputy stepped forward. "Ma'am, I can call a locksmith?" The door creaked open. It was the bartender from the video, mid-30s, inked arm, just as Danny had described. His eyes were shot with red. "I know what you're here for," he rasped. Sarah presented the order. "Then you know I require Tuesday's footage from 9 p.m. to midnight." The bartender eyed the paper like it was a bomb. "There's a complication." Sarah's gut tightened. "What kind of complication?" "The owner called me late last night, told me to wipe it. All of it." The deputy's hand drifted to his weapon. Sarah gave a subtle shake of her head. "And did you?" The man's gaze shifted between them, then to his own hands. His face was a battlefield of conscience, the same one Emma had seen in the bailiff. "No," he said, his voice firm. "I did not." Sarah exhaled slowly. "May I have it?" "I can do better than that." He swung the door wide. "I'll show you what really happened. My statement to the cops was a lie, and it's been eating me alive." His name was Chris Mullally, 34, tended bar at Kelly's for 3 years. He knew about the Shell Corporation, the true owner. He knew when Brennan's kids showed up, the tab was zero and trouble was overlooked. That was the rule. But Chris's own brother was an Iraq vet. He'd come home shattered, flinching at loud noises, unable to hold a job, living in his car until the VA finally came through. Seeing the news, hearing that audio, and realizing he'd helped frame a decorated Marine, it broke something in him. He pulled up the surveillance feed. 4 angles, sharp as glass, with perfect audio. Sarah watched the screen validate every word Danny said. Danny, alone at the bar. Tyler Brennan closing in. Brennan's hand grabbing Danny's shoulder, yanking him from the stool. Danny's response was pure instinct, over in under 3 seconds. Tyler was on the floor, clutching his face, while Danny stood over him, looking anything but angry. He looked terrified, like a man torn from his own time. "That's it," Chris said softly. "The kid started it. Your client defended himself. When the cops came, the kid's buddy called his dad. 20 minutes later, my phone rang with my new story." Sarah turned to the deputy. "Secure this. Every angle, all timestamps." "Yes, ma'am." She looked back at Chris. "Are you willing to testify to this?" Chris rubbed the tattoo on his arm. An eagle, globe, and anchor. The Marine Corps emblem, same as his brother's. "Yes," he said, unflinching. "I'll testify." Sarah's call came at 9:32. Emma was already on the road, on her second ever day of personal leave. "We got it!" Sarah's voice crackled with energy. "The video's airtight. It proves Tyler started it. Pure self-defense. The bartender is flipping and will testify that Brennan's people told him to lie." Emma's hands clenched the steering wheel. "What about the order to wipe the footage?" Chris Mullally was called at 11:47 p.m. last night by David Park, Brennan's lawyer, and ordered to scrub the servers. Chris is shielded, but that call is obstruction of justice. I'm moving to add Patrick Brennan and David Park to a criminal inquiry today. The DA's office is in chaos. This is a catastrophe for them. Mitchell Hayes, the original prosecutor, pushed that plea deal. I told him about the video. After a 10-second silence, he was stuttering about supervisors. He knew that makes him weak, and weak men make mistakes. As Emma pulled into the Virginia Pilot parking lot, Robert Harmon was waiting. He was tall, in his 50s, with silvered temples and a press pass on his coat. He extended a hand as she approached. "Chief Colton, thank you for your time." "Let's make this fast," Emma said. "I have another—" Emma told him everything. Maria's desperate call, the race to the courthouse, the judge's scorn for her medal, the Admiral's intervention. She laid out Danny's service, his injuries, the system that failed him. She recounted the bar incident, the fabricated charge, the councilman's son's deception. She held back only one detail, the full story of Marcus Webb. That weight was hers alone to bear. Harmon was riveted. When she was done, he killed the recording. His eyes locked on her. "This is off the record," he said, "but in 27 years of reporting on wars and politics, I've never met anyone like you." "I'm no one special, Mr. Harmon. With all due respect, ma'am, that's the first untruth you've told me." The story hit at noon, seizing the front page online and in print. Harmon was true to his word, centering the narrative on Danny's ordeal, not her heroics. The headline was blunt: "Marine veteran framed, councilman's son implicated in assault by new video." Emma's name was deep in the piece, her medal buried even deeper. This was about a warrior betrayed by the very system sworn to protect him. By 1 p.m. the story was national. At 2 the networks had it. By 3 Norfolk PD launched a review. And at 3:30 the DA dropped all charges. Sarah called Danny at 3:45. He was in Dr. Whitfield's waiting room at Portsmouth Naval, just as Emma had ordered. "Danny, it's over. The charges are gone. You're clear." Danny's knuckles were white on his phone. He sat in a cold, sterile chair among the silent company of other vets, all waiting. "Say that again," Danny breathed. "They're dropped. The video proved everything. You are free, Danny. Completely free." He doubled over, hand clamped to his forehead, eyes squeezed shut. A veteran nearby, a woman with a prosthetic leg, recognized the silent war he was winning. A firm hand on his shoulder spoke of solidarity, not sympathy. He accepted it. "Thanks," he whispered into the phone. "Sarah, thank you. It wasn't me. Credit Emma, the Admiral, and Chris Mallory for his integrity. Doctor, Whitfield is waiting, Danny. Just stay there." "I'm not moving." At 4 o'clock, Patrick Brennan, with his lawyer David Park, denied it all on camera, from his house, the brawl, the deception, even being at the bar. He framed it as a political attack on his family. The conference dragged on for 11 agonizing minutes. At 4:12, a journalist interjected. "Councilman, what about your lawyer's 11:47 p.m. call to the bartender, ordering him to delete security footage?" Brennan paled instantly. He glanced at Park, who appeared stunned. "That's a baseless claim," Park stammered. "I have the call records," she replied. Brennan turned and fled the stage. Park followed close behind, their retreat filmed by 3 networks. By 5 o'clock, the video was viral. By 6, Brennan faced administrative leave. By 7, the bar was after Park. By 8, Internal Affairs had seized all of Tyler Brennan's case files. Jessica Torres arrived in Norfolk at 4:30 that afternoon from Richmond, with one bag and a file she had protected for over a year, knowing its importance would emerge. Sarah greeted her at the office. Jessica looked frail, nervously holding the folder. Once Sarah asked if she was certain, Jessica said, "The woman with the medal in court, her composure. If she can be that strong, I can too." Sarah reviewed the file's contents. "You're braver than you realize," she said finally. "We will end this for you." Her official testimony was filed by 6:15 p.m. That evening, Kevin Marsh, a victim from 2 years prior, received a call. His agreement to testify solidified the case. Emma, on duty, was unaware of the developments. She started work at 7, donned fresh scrubs, and affixed the Medal of Honor to her chest. The head nurse noticed, but kept silent. Another nurse hugged her. A second whispered, "We had no idea." Emma simply nodded. At 8:45 in room 312, her phone vibrated. It was a message from Admiral Callahan. "NCIS is officially investigating Brennan. All of it. Obstruction, corruption, federal charges. You started an avalanche, Emma." She put her phone away and tended to her patient, a 68-year-old veteran named Arthur Phelps. "You all right, kid?" he asked, interrupting his story. "Everything's fine, Arthur. Breathing better?" "Much." "You see that news story about the nurse with the medal? Pulled 3 Marines from a firefight, took 3 hits and kept moving. 3 times. Incredible, he added. It is, Emma agreed softly, his eyes focused, shifting from her face to the medal on her uniform. Recognition clicked. My God, he breathed. It's you. Her silence confirmed it. She gave his hand a gentle squeeze. Rest now. As she left, the old veteran's arm shot up in a crisp salute, held until she was gone. 3 weeks later, Danny Ruiz attended his 4th counseling session. He had housing and support. The darkness was receding. I have to create something, he said to Dr. Whitfield, for the ones who slip through the system like I almost did. What kind of thing? The doctor asked. A helpline, so a vet in a bar knows who to call. Dr. Whitfield smiled. A new mission for you, Danny. It truly felt that way. He called Emma that evening. She sat before a blank television screen. I'm starting a helpline, Danny began, for veterans at their lowest point. Emma put down her food. Go on. He spoke for 20 minutes, his voice filled with a pre-war passion. His pitch ended. Emma answered instantly, I'm on board. Really? A real laugh escaped him. I almost believe you. You should. I honor my commitments. I know you do. Emma, it's for him, the web line, for Marcus. Emma gasped, her hand clutching her chest, her voice caught. Danny, she finally choked out. He'd be so honored. I know. The web line launched 6 months after. Danny ran it from a tiny office, working a single phone for 12-hour shifts. He had 3 helpers in a month, 20 in 3. The line soon took 200 calls a week. Patrick Brennan faced a federal indictment. David Park lost his license. Tyler Brennan received 18 months probation. Jessica Torres and Kevin Marsh filed a civil case. Judge Kessler was officially censured, a county first in a decade, but kept his seat. After 3 months, Kessler took a military sensitivity course. He was a changed man to Norfolk's lawyers. He became reserved, more attentive, and interrupted far less often. Admiral Thomas Callahan retired 8 months on. His final address wasn't about conflict, but a nurse and a Marine. His proudest service moment was supporting a hero in court, one who deserved to never stand alone. Sarah Chen became senior public defender within the year, scrutinizing every case and never taking a plea deal at face value. A photo of a nurse wearing the Medal of Honor sat on her desk, a reminder of true fortitude. And Emma Colton was back at the hospital the next day. She declined all media requests and book deals. Her routine was Norfolk General at 7 a.m., her calm presence a comfort to her patients. The medal was for Marcus Webb, who fell in her arms in Afghanistan. His sacrifice would not be forgotten. A year later, she lay awake at 4 in the morning. In the quiet, she held a warm cup. Her phone was still. She glanced at a drawer. The medal's velvet box was inside, but the decoration was on her uniform. She drank her coffee, and for the first time in 10 years she saw Marcus alive in her memory, not dying, but smiling. His hope had survived. She had guarded it well. Her eyes opened. She finished her coffee, dressed, and met the dawn. A life waited. Patience needed her. A vow made in Hellman's dust endured. Answer the call, hold the line, carry the fallen. Some heroes are made by fate. The rarest kind choose their heroism daily, in unseen, quiet acts. In quiet hospital corridors and on crisis calls, Emma Colton was that hero. She was and is that kind of hero. The Iron Widow required no audience to fulfill her duty.